Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Okay, so just to rewind, to put some context, because that may have been lost, but
Sure.
essentially, Raugi and I went to the same high school and have known each other since grade 7. The last thing I can really remember about Raugi is being in a play, and I was on the sort of the lighting and sound crew. And so of seeing him and doing the rehearsals and the performances and then suddenly discovering him like decades, 2 or 3 decades later, seeing
Right.
you're still in acting, still in acting. I'm totally floored. And in a way, we haven't seen each other in all these years. And so you have been thinking about, steeped in, like, completely, probably you've been teaching as well, from what I understand. You've been teaching this craft and the whole the depth of understanding that you have for acting is just, that experience is huge. One of the things that I was really inspired by was an image that you sent over of you made up as somebody, I don't know, 20 or 30 years in the future from now. So somebody like an elder
Right.
gentleman with the makeup. So how would you say you're thinking about the craft and about your own expertise or has matured?
Yeah, that's a good question. That timeline is super clear in my mind and in my heart. And I'll try to be quick about it, because it's these are massive events in my life. But, I started out angry, which I don't regret, because anger can get you far, but only so far.
Huh, okay.
In this business, so my body was bigger, like muscular, like my neck was thick and my chest was thick, and I was this young, kind of really in your face kind of actor, and that's exciting. But then after a while, casting goes, "Hey, dude, what else can you do?" Right? They're like, "Can you be vulnerable?" And I'm like, no. What does that mean?
Hulk smash.
Yeah, exactly, right? So now the industry, the craft is asking me to transform. And then I had to take a real hard look at myself. And then, really long story short, I move into the idea, the concepts of love, and how to be in love with my craft, how to be in love while I'm acting, even when my characters are doing terrible things, that kind of thing. How do I embrace the world with my heart? And that really transformed the way I worked, the way I saw things. That's kind of when I started to teach more. And then I started to really see my responsibility in cultivating the generation of actors coming up behind me.
Okay.
And they don't necessarily have to be young. They could be like 65.
Sure.
They're still baby actors. Because I realized that if I become afraid or whatever, and I don't cultivate those coming up behind me, my industry is going to die.
Okay. So you've been transitioning a little bit into directing, and
Yes.
I thought what you said was earlier about, it's true that on stage, you're right. The stage, essentially the frame of a stage is fixed. And so if you want to have a close up, or if you want the attention of the viewer to be on a small gesture or whatever, you have to kind of remove everything else, or else it'll get lost. Whereas with a camera, you can just tighten the frame or whatever. So how do you feel somebody who is learning to become an actor, how do you help them transition from stage to is that an easy transition to go from stage to film or TV?
That would depend on the individual. But in terms of technique, it's pretty easy. You just have to practice. Like
Like anything.
Like a kung fu,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I use terms like kung fu because these are, I consider artful things that are action driven.
Okay.
And all acting is a craft. However, acting is action.
Got it.
And I don't mean that physically. In fact, I mean that quite oppositely. I know that's not a word.
No, it's okay. No, in the opposite. Yeah.
Your heart. When I say something in front of the camera, you should be seeing or feeling what I'm doing.
Right. Okay.
Even though I'm still.
Right.
And that transition, and that's what I find coaching and teaching exciting, because that is different for every person. I have techniques and things like that I can ask people to do. But ultimately, those techniques show me what kind of person you are, how you think.
Mm-hmm.
So then I can go, okay, hold on. Forget what I said. Do that thing you just did now. What are you thinking there? What's happening? What part of the universe is aligning inside you for you to say that line just like that right now? And I try to inspire people to see themselves, to honor themselves, right? To really endeavor to know who they are so that they can give the most authentic acting that they can do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to act like me,
mm-hmm.
because that's not who we're casting.
Sure.
Like I said earlier, like casting's maybe the biggest part of the success of a project. People cast Raugi because of the way I act,
mm-hmm.
because of how I think. They can tell, like, oh, no, Raugi's good for this project. It's just there's something about him. But we all have the same techniques.
Right.
Right? But what's different is my spirit. Nobody has my spirit. So
have you had a project that was so challenging that, because at the end of it, it's also your job. So you come in every day, you show up. It's work. So you do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Your work is very, it's in sometimes your work is very emotional and sometimes it's very physical. Okay, so that's your thing. But have you ever had a day or a set of days where the work itself put you through the ringer that created a real awakening or kind of sparked a real change? Or has that ever happened?
Yeah. That happened to me, fortunately, earlier in my career, in my last year of theater training at UBC. And it's pretty important because I was cast in this lead part of a play called A Lie of the Mind by Sam Shepard. And the character is Jake, and he's like very broken. And the play opens with he thinks he's killed his wife. He thinks he's beaten her to death. And so I didn't have any safeguards. I didn't have any techniques. I just went in
raw
to this guy. Yeah. And I started doing weird, crazy things, and I isolated myself. Like, I didn't talk to anyone, and I just kind of lost myself in this character. What I did, I had a bench, a weights and bench press in my living room. So all I did was I ran my lines, I smoked cigarettes, and I did bench presses. And occasionally I would break shit against a wall because I was like losing my mind. And then I would go to school. And
do you think? So was that maybe a factor of you being younger, just being young?
Yeah, that was a factor, and I just wanted, like, I never played a part like that before, and I just wanted so badly to do a phenomenal job because I love this playwright so much. And then when the play closed, I was the same guy. I stayed as that guy for a good month.
Oh, wow.
And my friends were like, "What is your problem, man? Why are you being
pleasant.
such a dick?" And I'm like, and now immediately I'd be like, "What's your problem?" Like,
oh, really? Like you really? Wow.
Yeah, just like, lost it.
This is a completely tangential to but I find it fascinating. So you lose yourself in a character enough that it kind of sticks, enough to carry, like the echo kind of, is residual enough that you're kind of carrying it into for the following month, right?
Yeah, it was great, and I say, fortunately, it happened to me then, because when I discovered what had happened, I had to go through a psychological process on my own of like, oh, this is not me. This is Jake, who's walking on the furniture right now. Maybe I'll just sit down for a second, and then eventually I was able to separate him from me and let him go. But it's through that process that I was able to be safe in my acting from that point forward.
Okay.
So it didn't matter who I was playing, what I was playing. I could always find a way to leave that character on set, leave him at the theater, or bring him home and contain him until everybody went to bed.
Right.
And then go through a little process of like, okay, just like, it's okay. Nobody. Yeah.
So somebody who's in their own, like somebody who's, okay, so photography is not a performance in the sense that photography somebody who's using cameras to capture images and to try to tell an interesting story, they're not necessarily doing a performance, although it can be that.
Right.
But in acting, be it on stage or on, in film, you're being watched. There's a viewer that you're catering to in a way. You're trying to elicit feelings or impressions in a viewer. So how can you make connections from that to say somebody who's either when you're shooting a film with a camera or making images, stills? Is there a connection?
How do you mean exactly? Is there a connection?
Could you give some advice, or could you talk about, share it to a photographer to say, okay, listen, when you're making an image, it's not just about you. It's also about what you're going to elicit in the viewer.
Right. So I think I can speak to that from a filmmaking point of view, which I think is slightly different from a stills photography point of view. So I think, I don't know if this was cut off or not, but I was talking about how when I'm making a film, I'm creating the frames, I'm creating these shots to tell the story, and then I'm inserting actors into these shots, and then they speak the lines. If I want people to feel like sad, the actor helps, but all the strings of images that I'm going to put together before and after that actor talking, I'm trying to make that happen in those images. And I say it's different for filmmaking because there's soundtrack, there's Foley, like I can, you know what I mean? Like you can do there's so many other things that layers. Whereas, I've looked at a photograph before and just cried because that photograph touched something inside me, right? Like a piece of art, a painting or whatever. So
here, let me kind of wrap things together in the sense that, okay, you sent me 5 images, which I will put on the website. They're essentially portraits of you, which as a performer are necessary. And each one tells an interesting story. And in a way, for a viewer who kind of comes to see them, they synthesize their own sort of impression of you, right? So here's a question. How is this different from, say, a 16-year-old girl who does selfies every 5 minutes?
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.